Monica Perez here with finally returning guest Daniel Natal. We had a great conversation in our first meetup here, and I immediately asked him back on, and he, I don't know, stopped doing shows. So when you, Daniel, told me that you had read Meditations as an audiobook, and that was the book we were doing,
Mhm.
I hoped that you would come chat, and you said yes. So I'm super excited to see you. It's always fun. How have you been?
Oh, I've been doing very, very well. As you just suggested, I've been working on my desktop publishing business, doing audiobooks and stuff, and physical books as well. But yeah, I was listening to your reading of Meditations, and I was so impressed. And I think I mentioned in the comments, I was like, oratory and declaiming and stuff like that. These are arts that have kind of gone by the wayside, and I was just like, wow, she reads so well, just spontaneously off the cuff. See, I do not. So I do lots
Well,
of editing. So
thank you for suggesting that. And if you need a favor and you want a book read, I would do it for you as a
yes,
favor.
well, awesome.
Um, but it's hard for me to do it without interjecting chatter. So at first I did it because I thought, well, maybe it won't seem like a copyright violation if I'm talking about it and not just
Mhm.
reading it, but that's ridiculous. That would never work. But then we started to kind of develop a little rapport here in the chat, and it became super fun, and it keeps you awake when
Mhm.
you're like, it's hard to read. I fall asleep when I read. So this was a
Mhm.
way also to get me to read. So thank you for your
Yeah,
um
I've got to lock myself in the bathtub. I used to work for a publishing house out in California, and I had to read lots of bad manuscripts, and so I would have to sit in the tub so that I couldn't escape the manuscript.
yeah,
And so
and
that's
like
just
you can't sink. That's a great idea because I went
Mhm.
to law school and actually worked as an intern one summer. And
Mhm.
it really doesn't get, I mean, I would fall asleep on my desk, which looks very unprofessional, but I
Mhm.
just couldn't understand how everyone wasn't falling asleep on their desk. They did have like free drinks nightly, so
Mhm.
that could have been the
Oh,
problem.
I was just gonna say this is the solution coffee, but you meant the
Yeah,
other kind of drink.
that's true. I do. That does keep me up.
Yeah.
But so here is something I was starting to tell you before we went on the air.
Mhm.
But first, let's say where people can find the stuff that you're doing that's already out or what's
Yeah,
coming,
just
what's
go on
about
to
to happen.
Amazon.com or Audible or any of those fine, reputable places and just put in, for instance, Meditations by Marcus Aurelius, read by Daniel Natal. Just put Daniel Natal in there,
All
boom,
right.
it'll come up and you can listen to it. I wanted to, oh, but God, I'm
I was just going to
interrupting you.
say, what are
Okay.
you working on now? But for I'll get to that. But you say I wanted to what?
Oh, I wanted to mention we were talking about books we're reading, and I brought. Hold on a second. I brought this book, which is what I'm reading right now, which is called "The Unintended Reformation" by Brad Gregory. And Gregory makes an interesting point. He's a professor, and he is a Catholic, as it turns out. And he's talking about all the changes that happened between, Christendom. So the Catholic Church rules, the West or whatever you want to call it, for 1,500 years. And so under Christendom, he said that Christianity originally was a mixture of Neoplatonism and Stoic philosophy. And he said as the Protestant Reformation kind of, transitions, then it goes from Stoic philosophy, like for instance Jesus, saying it's harder for a rich man to get into the kingdom of God than for a camel to fit through the eye of a needle and stuff like that. He's always stressing that your happiness and your fulfillment and the center of your life is not on material possessions, and that's in line with the Stoic philosophy that was very popular at that time. But after the Protestant Reformation, it switches over from Stoic philosophy to Epicureanism, and I thought that was such a profound observation, because Epicureanism is, of course, luxury, and big meals and gluttony and all this kind of stuff. And I sent you, I don't know if you have the ability to play it, but I sent you a thing on Ben Shapiro uh, talking about, kind of his reason for why he thinks that America is great. And I was wondering, did
Okay,
you get a chance to look at
I
that
did
yet?
have it. I watched it. I don't want to play it, but what you just said, like, I have to talk to you about that. I have to
Mhm.
think about that. So, um, did you say that the church was a combination of Neoplatonism and Stoicism prior to the Reformation, the Catholic Church? Okay, so
Or
I to
Christianity in general, yeah.
yeah, I total well, that's all there was, right? So I total although I guess the schism, someday I'd
Mhm.
like to talk to you about that, but I totally agree with that. Like the Neoplatonism thing, somebody mentioned it to me or suggested it to me, and it absolutely made sense that like the medieval cloisters or abbeys or whatever were basically Platonic. Like they
Oh
pulled
yeah.
the smart kids and they made them, brought them into this hierarchy, and it was communal and all of that. And then of course the Stoicism in Marcus Aurelius's Meditations. Yes, it's not the complete story, but it definitely resonates with a lot of Christian virtues.
Mhm,
So I want to talk about that. But then you're saying after the Reformation,
mhm.
the church changed to Epicureanism, and I
Well,
would
the Protestants.
Italianism, the
The
Protestant. Okay,
the
so the
Protestant, yeah,
Christian
so
part, yes.
one of the things that, like, was struggling with and questioning and, things like, for instance, you mentioned the social setup of, priests and stuff like that, in the under Christendom, and that's very Platonic because if you read Plato's Republic, he talks about society being run by the gold class, the silver class, the bronze class, or whatever. And the gold class are people who are running the society, the brains of the society he equates with, and they're not allowed to have families.
I was gonna say they don't have children. Yeah,
Yeah, because it takes away it removes the
absolutely. It
nepotism
does.
and the
Absolutely.
reasons why people steal is, "Oh, I wanna give Ivanka a head start, so I'm gonna take her to the World Economic Forum, and I'm gonna do things for Don Jr." Or whatever,
Yeah, I'm a
and
strong, advocate for men celibate men priests.
yeah, yeah, so basically, they were not harking back to the Old Testament, they were harking back to Plato. Like, Plato, for instance, 300 BC, Plato says, if a perfectly moral man ever came to Earth, he would be tortured, humiliated, and crucified. So you see the
Wow.
Jesus narrative is not in the Old Testament, it's in Plato.
Well, the
Uh,
allegory of the cave, I
mhm,
like blocked it out in my head that in the end they kill the guy.
yeah,
I
yep.
always block that out. It's like, wait, wait, wait. Every time I read it, I'm like, they kill the
You burned my eyes. Yeah,
guy?
exactly.
Yeah.
And, but another thing that comes from, Neoplatonism or, was, was also the Trinity. And so if you read Plato's Republic, just as he, creates this taxonomy of society with, three different groups at the top. So at the top are the intelligence people. Those are logos, logic, the logical principle, which would be, the body politic. It would equate to the brain. And then he says in the middle is the spirit of the society. And he says the spirit, the courage. And he was like, those are the soldiers and the police, and they have this energy, this spiritual energy, the spirit of the society. And then at the bottom is the appetitive, which is the carnal, which is, sex and eating and all that kind of stuff. And those are the artisans and the farmers. And so those are the three things. And so when you look at early Trinitarian kind of expostulations, it was like, okay, there's God the Father, who's logos, which is
Right.
comparable to the gold class. There's the Holy Spirit, which is the
Yep.
spirit in the center, and then at the bottom is Christ in the flesh, which is the
Yes.
carnal. So you get all three of those, and the three part
Yeah, the lamb.
aspect of the soul. Yeah. So the Trinity really does not. Once again, and Jews will tell you this, it does not come from the Old Testament. It comes from Plato. So those elements of, you take Plato and then you take Stoic philosophy from like Seneca from the time. For instance, Seneca, if you read the letters of Seneca, you will see a lot of things. Seneca was, just for your audience, was would have been a contemporary of Jesus Christ. He was born in the first century at exactly the time period, and he would say things like, if you want to behave in a proper fashion, imagine somebody you really respect, kind of standing invisibly over your shoulder. So imagine Cicero standing over your shoulder watching you. And so Christians took that and repurposed it and said, imagine Jesus. What would Jesus do? That's from Seneca. So a lot of you, if you read the letters, you will see borrowings left and right from the Stoics that
Well,
kind of make their way into Christianity.
I've heard criticisms recently of the idea, and I don't get into these kind of arguments because I don't care. Like I like the argument being that they're really the Trinity is this creation from like whatever they're. Well, I'll tell you something in a second, but that'll clarify. But the Trinity is a creation. It really doesn't make sense. It's not scriptural. Blah blah blah. I don't care about that stuff really at all. I care about like the practical stuff. I like the corporal works of mercy, the spiritual works of mercy. I
Mhm.
like the intellectual history of Catholicism. I like the behavior stuff and all of that. The true nature of God and whatever. It doesn't go so far as to be like fairies, angels dancing on the head of a pin, but I can't. I just that stuff goes too far. However, just as I was thinking about that, just somebody called to my attention that the Trinity was a creation, more or less. It was also thrust upon me in preparation for this show, Pope Leo's um, whatever it was, encyclical around the 1700th anniversary of the Nicene Creed. Did you
Mhm.
happen to hear? So he went to.
Mhm.
I'm incensed by this. His first international trip was to Turkey, which is not a Christian country, which is massacring Christians in Syria, and it's terrible. It's a terrible thing. And he didn't go for that reason. He went to tell them that they're the harbingers of peace in Ukraine and all this kind of
Yeah, I
crap. Really
saw
pissed
that
me off.
with Ataturk.
Yeah.
He went to Ataturk's grave, and Ataturk was the president of Turkey who presided over the Armenian and Kurdish
Yeah, the
and Greek
genocide. Yes.
genocide. Yeah, so he's like paying homage to the guy who was killing Christians, and it was like, aren't
Yeah.
you the defender of Christians? Why are
It took
you?
me maybe 20 seconds after he was elected to be like,
Yeah.
first I was like, okay, it's not good that he's American. Like whatever it is, it's not good. Because that just means that we're going to be the focus of whatever psyop this represents. And second of all, what does he have to say? And I went back and first of all read his tweets, which in them that is in itself a bad sign. The guy tweets, and that he was decided that Putin is an imperialist and the Ukraine war is just and defensive and all this crap, which is wrong. So it's not only unjust in the war, but he's literally lying because he can't possibly know that because it's not true. So I'm not a fan, and this just made me even more pissed. But it was an interesting, the right word is expostulation or whatever, like of what of the Nicene Creed and where things such as the Trinity came from. You know, they're very erudite, these guys, like you.
Yeah, well, these guys. Well, thank you. But a lot of stuff was coming out of Alexandria in Egypt, and so even the Jews, like Philo of Alexandria, before the Christian period, right before the Christian period. You have to remember Alexander the Great conquers like the whole known world at that time. So for 300 years, there's been a Hellenization process. Like when they dug up the graves of Jerusalem in the first century, 3/4 of the tombs were written in Greek, not in Aramaic.
Yes, and actually the word barbarian just means people who don't speak Greek.
Yeah, yeah, because that's how they sounded to him. But so the Jews, even before the Christian period, had articulated this 3-part aspect of the soul, and that's in the Kabbalah, by the way, the nephash. I can't remember the terms that they use for it in Hebrew.
Yikes.
But they basically were in Alexandria. They were studying Plato, and so for the Jews, they took Plato and they put that in the Kabbalah. For the Christians, they took Plato and they put that in kind of their theology. And it was all over the place, and it's been suppressed since the Protestant Reformation. There's been this war against Greeks, against Hellenization. Like Martin Luther said very famously, I admit it, Aristotle makes me sick to my stomach. And he could not stand, like if you read Dante as an example, he will mix classical antiquity. For instance, his Cicerone, when he's in the underworld and stuff like that, it is a Roman poet, Virgil. Right. So he's mixing Moses with Virgil and, like classical antiquity with the Christian period. And so Martin Luther was looking at this and he was like, oh, the Roman church is so Greek. We need to get rid of all the Greek stuff, all the Greek. But if you get rid of all the Greek influence, there's no Christianity. You're just back at the Old Testament. And that's why there's Christianity, which is Catholicism. And then there's Judeo-Christianity, which is what the Protestants took out. You're
the only other person who knows that besides me. Like that, the Judeo-Christian thing is a way for Protestants to skip Catholicism and not have to acknowledge their roots.
Christianity, yeah, because their war against the Greeks is actually kind of an oblique war against the Catholic Church. And once you remove all the Greek aspects, there's no Christianity. It's just basically Judaism, which is why they're always quoting the 10 Commandments. They're never quoting Jesus's 2 commandments. It's always the Old Testament for them.
Yes. So here's why I was a little confused when you told me what your current project is. What are you reading for your audiobook?
I am reading. I'm at the end of the month, I will be releasing the King James Bible, which is the Protestant Bible, which is you're pointing that out rather than the Dewey Rames Bible, which is the Catholic Bible, which has like 7 more books in it.
That's written a little different.
Oh, very, very different. I have a friend, a Protestant friend, and she is comparing kind of the Protestant Bible, which is based on the Masoretic text, which is, the Hebrew, but from the Middle Ages, right? Versus the Septuagint. The Septuagint is from like 250 BC, and that's what the apostles and Jesus are quoting from the Septuagint. And so the Catholic scriptures are kind of more based on the Septuagint, although they also have Masoretic influences as well, unfortunately. But my friend is like reading side by side, and they were remarkably different. I mean, shockingly different. Things that were changed and altered and excised and interpolated. Because we've always been led to believe, oh, well, this is such a holy book, and nobody would ever dare to change. But then when you're looking side by side at these texts, it's really quite shocking. But yeah, so I decided to do the King James, unfortunately, because we're in the Anglo sphere, and so a friend of mine who is not a Catholic was like, "Oh, Daniel, you've got to do the King James Bible because it's so beautiful. Even if it's not as accurate, it's just so beautifully written." And it is. So I was like, "Okay,
Well,
I'll do the King
I
James."
will defend you in this way. A friend of mine, a listener friend of mine, when I say that, I mean people I met through my show or my podcast or whatever, who are actual friends of mine. So she's a listener friend of mine in Georgia, sends me things. It's very nice of her. And she sent me a chronological Bible. So like that doesn't rate on anybody's thing as like the Bible, but it's like rearranged so that anything that's repeated, the same story told in different ways. I'm still in the
Mhm.
Old Testament, but like it's put in the next to each other.
Mhm.
And it's so much easier to read. So my plan is to finish reading it this way and then go and read the Catholic one, because sometimes, if something's complicated, it's easier to read it and then reread it to really understand it. Or, if you're going to review a movie, watch it and then rewatch it to really understand it. So I am reading this abomination that I really like. And, these things have their place.
Yeah, that's really. I had that thought too, to bring out a version of the Bible. So it's interesting that somebody's already done it.
And what about the Jefferson Bible, which I haven't gotten through, even though it's teeny tiny? It's just things Jesus said.
Yeah.
Of course, without Paul, you really don't know.
Yeah, but Paul is
Paul's
interesting.
Like 80% of it.
Paul is very in line with what Jefferson did. So Jefferson is a deist. He excised all the miracles. He didn't really put much stock in them, much store in them. And so he removed, deleted all those things, and he just kind of left, what Jesus most likely did and most likely said. And Paul does that too. If you read the Pauline epistles, Paul does not mention a single miracle of Jesus, not once. He only quotes Jesus twice. And everything else is just kind of Paul's theology, which at times can be quite different from Jesus's theology. And, so when Jefferson did that and everybody acts like, they're clutching their pearls, oh, he's implying that Jesus didn't do miracles. And it's like, can't you respect him, whether you believe, in the miracles or not?
My father loved miracles and my mother didn't care at all. I don't need that stuff. I don't need that. But I've experienced enough miracles that it's like, I'm like my dad. Like, that's what keeps my faith going. It's hard for me to intellectually comprehend knowing my name after I'm dead. Like, it's very hard for me to even think about afterlife or anything like that existing in the non-material world. I just can't think like that. But when I experience miracles and prayers and stuff that just defy the odds, I feel like that's. And also creation itself is an indication to me that there's something in the next, outside of this system that has an organization. So anyway, you apparently have some fans here. I really missed Daniel being held hostage by the mainstream media. So what is your I don't even know your backstory, Daniel.
Oh no, it's my backstory. I used to create content for the New American Magazine, and then I left the New American Magazine, and then I've just been in the wilderness, living in my van by the river and busking, doing a lot of busking.
All of those references, yes.
Coins thrown at me. No, I've just been working on my book stuff and writing and doing audiobooks and stuff, and being very happy. I'm probably going to start doing content now that we're in 2026 again. But for right now, I'm going to concentrate on just kind of getting audiobooks up on YouTube to see how many clicks we can generate to kind of finance like a re-inauguration, resumption of efforts on my part. But what I wanted to say on the other side of what you were just talking about, right? So I believe in miracles too. I've experienced very strange things. I've prayed and miraculously it happened, and it could be coincidence, but
tomorrow's the anniversary of the fire in LA.
Mhm.
which I absolutely I
You
prayed for a
pray
miracle. I
you
asked for a
prayed for
miracle.
that? You
I
were like,
saw
"God,
my
smite my
house
enemies.
burning on no, 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 I live here. I saw
God,
my
smite
house
my
burning
enemy."
on TV. I literally saw my house burning on TV at
Oh,
7 o'clock in the
no.
morning and got in the car to go watch it burn. I was like, "Fuck it, if it's burning, I'm gonna watch it burn."
Oh, man.
And, it was the fence and the backyard are on fire, and
Mm,
some people pushed it out. It was a lot of things contributed, but I saw it, and Stella, who's in the chat right now, said, "Don't give up hope." She didn't realize I actually saw my own house burning on TV. So I was like, "Okay, I'm gonna pray for a miracle," and I got it. So that was
wow.
my last, like, I'm not doubting anymore. I was just like, "You gave that to me. Thank you. I appreciate it."
Yeah.
Probably to save my soul, if for no other reason, I'm going with it.
Yeah, I'm gonna go with the smite my enemies, prayers. Please
No,
destroy them. Um,
no, no.
yeah, but, no, but okay, so on the other side of the balance sheet, okay, so I like you, I believe in miracles and stuff, but on the other side of the balance sheet, I also see a logic, like, if you're looking at God as logos, right? And that's a revolutionary aspect of Christianity, that God is the rational principle, and the closer we come to reason, the closer we come to philosophy, the closer we come to the thoughts of God, right? So we're living in the subjective, and the closer we come to the objective is the closer we're coming to God. And so when I look at Thales of Miletus, he was the Greek philosopher, I think around maybe 500 BC. I don't know. I'll have to fact check that, but he was before Socrates, and he was the first guy to look up at eclipses and say, "Hey, these are not the result of the anger of deities, but the logical, mathematically calculable movement of astronomical bodies." And so he's noticing there's an algorithm, and because he notices there's an algorithm, he can predict when the next eclipse is going to come. And all of a sudden, say, "Oh wow, this superpower! This he must be a mystic. He must be a holy man." And he's like, "No, I'm just using pattern recognition, logic, science, philosophy." And so if you take that tack and you say, "Okay, if God is logos and God has created these algorithms, which we call the laws of nature, then if there is code, that means there's a code writer, right? So the code is evidence that there is a God." Right? These algorithms. So basically, not miracles prove God, but the lack of miracles, the fact that the sun rises at the same time every day, the fact that, like Picasso said, that I do not dissolve like a sugar cube in a tub of bathwater. These things that we just take for granted are the biggest proofs of God, because it is calculable, it is replicable, which means there is code.
I
So,
remember in 5th grade, and I can also tell you based on that, that there's free will, so give me a second. But I remember in 5th grade kind of keeping, um I have to write that down. Okay. Keeping a like kind of mental tally of all the things I was learning in science, because I was in Catholic school. They started science in 5th grade. And my father's literally like, they shouldn't teach you science because evolution, which I thought he was out of his
no,
mind
no, he
until
was
I
referring to you burning down your house years later. But go ahead.
I
I'm
don't get
teasing.
it.
I'm teasing you. You were
You're
just
too
telling us
clever.
your house burnt down.
Yes.
I was just
So
joking, as if you had done a science experiment.
yeah, no, 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 no. Although I do live in Pasadena, where the famous Parsons did blow himself up in a satanic experiment.
Mm.
But that's for the conversation for another time.
Jack Parsons, yeah.
Yes. Very good. So the um so when I was in I would keep a kind of a tally of all the things that science taught that were inconsistent with science.
Mhm,
So order cannot come out of chaos. That's a scientific principle. Like entropy is the forward moving thing. So
mhm.
how did we get an ordered universe out of like a big bang or something? Like out of nothing. And nothing can't come from something. Life cannot come from non-life. That's a scientific tenet.
Yeah.
Yet here we are. Like there were many of those. I think I had 5 of them, like solid
Wow, as a kid?
your yes,
That's
my father
impressive.
always said, well, I was smarter when I was younger. And my father, I'm the youngest of 9. My father just, he would talk to me a lot, I think, because I was the last one, and we would just talk, and we would think he was a truck driver, and we would, like, drive around, and we would just talk and think. It was quite stimulating, and he was telling me things that was different from what I was learning in school, and then later, when I actually thought about the math of Darwinism, I'm not saying evolution, Lamarck, and stuff like that, epigenetics. I'm saying Darwinism is mathematically impossible. Just because their theory is that a tiny change every time. So, like when you have different alleles or whatever have to
Mhm.
build up to like a real mutation of like an eyeball or whatever. But the theory of Darwin would have to be that every single person who didn't have the first little allele mutation would have to have been wiped out. Otherwise, you're talking about mutations upon mutations that don't have that Darwinian mechanism of like
Yeah.
survival of the fittest. Anyway, so okay, but here's where science proves free will is that I used to also think this. I used to wonder if God knows or I know or whatever all the laws of math and physics and the position of every atom, molecule, whatever in the universe, could I predict the future? And the answer is no. And science will tell you that's chaos theory. But the answer has to be no if you have free will.
Yep.
And chaos theory does prove free will. And Einstein wouldn't believe in chaos theory because he didn't believe in free will. How
Yeah,
backwards is
Immanuel
that?
Kant says that. He makes the same argument in Metaphysical Morals that we look at human beings as physical particles. Particles in physics, like a bowling ball. If you drop a bowling ball, it's
Yeah.
always going to go in the same direction. The fact that a human is not always going to go in the same direction means we are not particles. We're not dead random particles that always go. We have free will. So now it introduces all these variables that wouldn't if we're and this is, he said, all ethics, all morality is based on the fact that we do have free will. If we didn't have free will, ethics would be meaningless.
And the
If we
laws
were
of
particles.
physics allow for that.
Mhm.
Like chaos theory, like the laws of physics, they have to make room for that. That's true for all of these principles. Like when you look at science, it has to make room for all of these, the sanctity of life and the existence of free will and all of that. So we're still, and I when I used to wonder about the existence of God, like could you prove it or not prove it? I stopped my ponderings when I looked back at like what the Greeks would say, what Socrates and stuff said, and I said, I thought to myself, have we made any real progress in proving or disproving God? And we haven't. So I'm like, I'm not wasting my time. And as my mother said, it's just a better way to live. So it's a better way to live. It's a better way to live, not only
Yeah.
like because it's good, but it's a better way to live because it's less stress, it's less anxiety, it's good. It's just good. It's better.
That's what
That's what I
Cicero
like.
describes ethics. He
Yeah.
says that ethics is the art of living well. It's the art of like a beautiful life, beautiful behavior.
Yes. So
You
my mother used to also say, "You're confusing happiness and pleasure. It's not you want pleasure, but it doesn't make you happy." But,
Well,
then I had a rich friend who was like, "Yes, yes, it does."
we're going
Because it's never ending.
we're going full circle because okay, one of the points that it was in my subconscious to articulate was um, virtue is happiness, right? And I saw this guy on CNN, and it stayed with me. He made the same point your mom did that Americans often confuse fun and happiness. And he said fun is like Disney World, right? That's like kind of like empty carbs, right? You get fun, you spend your money, it's over the next day. He said happiness is like when you learn a foreign language and it's really, really hard and you're crying, trying to conjugate all these things, and it's so frustrating. But within a year, suddenly you find yourself having a conversation with somebody and you're so proud of yourself. You've built up your human capital. He said that is happiness. And so that is kind of the difference between virtue and vice and Stoic philosophy and Epicureanism. So in Stoic philosophy, like virtue is basically you get all the pain up front. Like if you exercise, right, it's painful. You're doing all this, putting your body under duress. But after a year, you look good in a swimsuit and you go to the beach and you're proud of yourself because it's sustained effort. Like character is based on sustained effort. And and so you get the payout at the end. You get the pain up front, payout at the end. With vice, it's the opposite. You get the fun up front, right, of the heroin, but then after, at the back end, you get, kind of cellular damage and you die, right? So fun is kind of like is like vice based, it's the payouts all up front, and then you get the bill for Disney World, and you're like, oh my god, could that really be? And then virtue is is the Stoic philosophy is you put yourself under privation, you work hard. Like the Roman Empire, they used to have they put a premium on kind of abstaining from luxury because they didn't want to become, as Aristotle says, soft and effeminate.
Oh, yeah.
And so good.
Yeah, no, I visited my old law school, and it had been very dumpy. And when I went there now, it's so overwhelmingly rich. Like
Mm.
New York City's like that too. And I've just noticed that stuff gets really, really rich. And I immediately said to my husband, like, I don't want my kids going to this school. Like, this is bad. I go out of my way to not do that. It's poison. It's poison. It ruins you. When you're young, you need to develop character. That's the last thing you need. You need something to work for, something to want. So finish your thought, and then I have something to.
No, that was well, go ahead. You finish.
No, I'm
Let's
done,
do
and then I
and
gotta.
that,
I'm picking up something else.
okay. Well, I was going to say do the Ben Shapiro thing because I wanted to
Oh, you
show
ready?
the
Okay, yeah,
audience
let's
that,
do it.
and then
Here we go.
okay.
But America is not what it used to be. Wouldn't you concede that?
No.
That you wouldn't concede that
No,
it's
I
not
think
what
America
it used to be?
no, I think that America is in many ways better than it ever was. I mean, I think that
Why?
Because I mean, name a time in American history that was better for, say, Black Americans.
I can't. I'm not going to deny that. I don't think it's great right now, but I'm certainly not going to imply that this is as bad as it was in the 60s and the 50s and beyond and before
Even
that.
the 80s.
I'm
I mean,
saying-
like,
oh,
right. I mean, like,
obviously, to some
yeah,
degree,
I mean,
no question about that. I'm not going to make that
this
argument.
is sort of the problem that I have is people kind of look back to a storied past and they tell themselves a story about it. On the right, they tend to say things like, well, if it were only like the 1950s, and if only we had the manufacturing jobs we had in the 1950s. And I kind of sit there and I say, well, really? I don't think you'd want to sit in like a Ford factory in a rivet 8 hours a day.
Mhm.
Like you sit in an air-conditioned office and your main physical threat is sciatica.
Mhm.
I really don't think that's the same thing. And you know, there tends to be a belief that your parents had it better than you did. No, your parents lived in an era where you had to go to a payphone to call your family and spend $1 a minute to do so. And now you have a magical machine in your pocket that gets you any piece of information you could ever want instantaneously. And you can order any product for cheaper than anybody in human history, and it will be at your door inside of 2 days. So that's not to say there aren't problems. There for sure are problems. But you know, the idea that anybody on Earth or in all of human history who's airdropped into the United States wouldn't look around and go, "Holy, like this is kind of amazing." Is I think gratitude is a good thing. Is what I'll say about this.
Okay, so what I wanted to say about that was note that he says America is great because we have cell phones, we have
Yes.
luxuries, we have stuff, right? And so the Bible,
It's not positive.
so Ben Shapiro, like who has the yarmulke on and he's always virtue signaling as a pious Jew. In Proverbs, it says Proverbs 14:34, God says, righteousness exalteth a nation, not luxury, righteousness. So Ben Shapiro didn't make the argument, hey, we're a great nation because we're a virtuous nation. He made the Epicurean argument, we're a great nation because we have luxury, we have stuff, we have lots of stuff. But that rots your soul. Like there's a quote I also brought here. It goes, Frank Lloyd Wright said, give me the luxuries of life and I will willingly do without the necessities. Right. So Ben Shapiro is like, oh, give me the luxuries of life and I'll do without the necessities in the sense of, okay, I'm going to give you a cell phone, but you won't be able to start a family. You won't be able to afford to have a home or property or children. Like Adam Smith said that in The Wealth of Nations, he said that the true measure of wealth is how many children you can afford to have. And by that metric, we're failing. So we went from like 10 children per family to 4 children per family to 2 children to 1 children to dogs. And so they're giving you the luxuries, but none of the necessities.
And not only is that, I mean, the cell phone though is also a tool of enslavement. When he said that, I was like, having that thing in your pocket, it's probably just like the washing machine. From I read the stat, true or not, doesn't matter. The point is made that we spend more time doing laundry now than we did before the washing machine. Because now we wash our clothes all the time, every day. I mean, I do a lot of laundry. And similarly, I don't think that we work less. Yeah, I'm sure you do too. We don't work less because we have all these tools. I mean, all productivity improvements, I think, are sucked up to the top.
Oh, yeah.
And not to mention by creating luxury and monetizing everything and making everything super, like, transactional has different words, but transactional. What you really want is you've completely devalued non-monetized time. And so you don't have leisure, which is what you do spend with your family. Looking stuff up in a dictionary is a skill, is a process. It's, the next step on the cell phone thing is AI, where you don't even have to think anymore. Yes, it's helpful. I can prepare more quickly when I use an AI tool, but I mean, it's also good to read a book.
Yep. Or you mentioned transactional, right? So like in the pre-Protestant period, let's call it the pre-Epicurean period, you had the concept of, say, marriage, right? So marriage, you're bonded with somebody because you love that person, you want to create a family. Now there's this transactional kind of relationship, not just with, a romantic partner or, but just in general, this which is prostitution. So everything is monetized. Everything has been reduced to this soulless level, this transactional level, which is capitalism. So Ben Shapiro makes those, not to bash him, but makes his arguments. There was a guy named Talcott Parsons. He was a sociologist back in the 40s and 50s, and he wrote that capitalism is inherently erosive to traditionalism because capitalism is always searching after new ways to do things. And so Ben sells this kind of notion, capitalism and conservatism, as if they could, one actually erodes the other. He doesn't tell his audience and he made people angry on Twitter or something. He watched It's a Wonderful Life, and he was looking at Bedford Falls, and he was looking at Mr. Potter turning it into Pottersville with prostitutes and gambling and racketeering and all this kind of stuff. And Ben said, "You know what? Mr. Potter is the real hero of It's a Wonderful," and he was dead serious.
Yeah, no, I'm sure he was.
Because it becomes a transactional society. It becomes a money where money is the highest.
But the other side is bad too, because what Jimmy Stewart is pushing is debt. It's like, he says, why don't they just say, Potter says to him, why don't they just save their money and buy a house? Nobody could ever do that. Nobody could ever save money and buy a house. They need to borrow the money to buy a house. So the whole movie is just absolute. It's a bad versus bad.
Well, somebody like they kind of attacked the values of It's a Wonderful Life. And they did at the time. I mean, the FBI was like, is this subversive? Is this socialism that they're promoting? But it really wasn't. It was like at rock bottom, it was the tenets of Christianity. It was the idea that there is something higher than the money motive, that you not your community. You would actually forego the quick buck, because once again, so the quick buck is the payoff up front. Yeah. And then you turn into Detroit on the back end. That's the trajectory Ben Shapiro and the people like him. They're basically, we're going to turn your whole country into Detroit. But isn't it wonderful? Because in the short term, I make a lot of money. But in the long term, I'm going to trash the place, but it's okay because I won't even be here. So
that's a different value system.
Yeah.
And so here's a problem that I had that you might have some insight into. I was raised as a libertarian. My father was what would probably be called a classical liberal, and I'm an extreme libertarian. So I'm never going to say you should ban prostitution. I will look at something like abortion and say that's a competing rights issue. And I'm going to say, a human being can't commit violence against that human being. And I'll look at immigration and say, well, we don't have a libertarian society, and open immigration would be impossible to really sustain. So you have to, whatever your principles. And I can say I don't want to make prostitution illegal, but I also think that prostitution is,
it's not ideal.
An offense. It's an offense against human dignity.
Yeah.
Which I respect and feel an obligation to promote, and certainly not to look at with indifference. I don't like indignity. So, I mean, how do you look at one of the many libertarian conundrums in that context?
Well, I used to be a libertarian too, and I would hear these really libertarian arguments, like what Joe Rogan, when he was promoting gay marriage, he was like, how does this affect you? It's not going to affect. And he was making arguments that people in the 90s were making, like ignoring all the sociological changes, like they're teaching your kids. And at the time, they're, we're not going to teach the kid, we're not going to have rainbow flags in elementary school.
Libertarianism has been totally weaponized in that way. I'm sure that's why it was promoted in the first place.
But his foundational argument was flawed, right? Because what he was saying was this. He was saying, okay, well, how does someone else's marriage affect you? And the answer to that, Joe, is marriage is a social institution. It's not, individuals don't exist in a void. It is a social institution. Now, what does that mean? It means that when they get married, it affects everyone around them. So if you have a girl who does not get married, but she gets pregnant, and all of a sudden she's like, okay, I'm pregnant. I don't have a husband. I'm really in dire straits. I'm going to go get money from the community. So I'm going to tax all of you to pay for my vice. So now her behavior does.
That's why
affect.
welfare is
There's
a moral
ripple.
hazard.
Yeah, there's a ripple effect. And so when Joe Rogan is like, oh, well, how does this social institution affect you? Because it's social, moron. It's social. It's right there.
Yeah, it wouldn't even be a thing. It only exists in context.
In the sociological
of society.
context. Yeah. Like Aristotle says that with ethics. He says that ethics cannot exist on an individual level. It only exists once you are interacting with other people. You know, like politics starts with that concept of politics. Man is a social animal. Man is a political animal. You are interacting with other people. Your behavior does affect other people. So that sociopath idea that what does it matter if I do cocaine while I'm driving the train? It's not going to affect anyone else. Well, it does. You know, and where insofar as it does, then you have to regulate it so that you don't hurt others.
So then what's your view of the proper form of government, role of government, limits of government?
It kind of gets back to what I kind of touched on before with Ben Shapiro. You know, does God see your society as good because you've got luxuries, or does he see it because of righteousness and virtue? And Montesquieu talked about you know, the different end goals. Different governments have different end goals. Aristotle talks about that as well. So the end goal of an oligarchy is the transfer of the wealth of the many to the few. The end goal of a democracy is equality. And he says the end goal of a republic is the promotion of virtue among the people, not the promotion of luxuries, the promotion of virtue among the people. So if your government is not doing that and it's claiming to be a republic, it's failing, and it's like a refrigerator whose end goal is to keep food cold, and your food is all warm and wilted and rotten. You would know, hey, I've got a bad refrigerator. So if you have a republic that is not promoting virtue, instead it's promoting vice. And Montesquieu says that as well. He says in a tyranny, he says the tyrant will promote vice even in the schools. And he said this makes for bad citizens, but it makes for good slaves, because they want you vice-ridden. They want you more, you know, looking at navel gazing. Am I a boy? Am I a girl? You know, like they want you, your head there, so that you don't notice that the tyrant is ripping you off and taking all of your freedom. So he promotes vice, which is where we are. So we're not in a functional republic because we're not promoting virtue. And if we were promoting virtue, we would be promoting things like, hey, try to have children within a family context, because you can take care of them. You can raise more functional,
or even just
people.
start. I mean, we're far beyond that. Like the dehumanization of, you know, women walking around like not only practically naked, but really looking bad. I remember when I moved from Atlanta to LA, I was struck by, or I lived in LA, then I moved to Atlanta, then I moved back. When I moved to Atlanta, I noticed immediately that women try to look pretty. So like in LA, women just try to look trendy or fashionable or skinny or rich or whatever. I don't know what it is, but it's not like, wow, she looks pretty. She looks cool. Or
like status. Yeah.
Yeah. Like there's just something. And then the kids are wearing like stuff that's statusy, which obviously is being imposed upon them. But, you know, young girls, like borderline adolescent girls looking very slutty. Like it's so dehumanizing. And I think it gets in their heads that they're objects. Like I say TikTok is to girls what porn is to boys, like where the girls are the objects. They think of themselves as the objects of the porn. That's why they make these ridiculous videos where they're you know, degrading themselves, in my opinion. But
Monica, I've noticed that your microphone is covering up your cleavage. Can you please move the microphone and stay, like all women on the internet? They're
you
always
know how
like,
hard it is to cover up this cleavage. Like I have to
I'm
tell
joking.
you,
I've never
I would
even
look a
noticed
lot
if you have
thinner
it.
if I let that go. But yeah, no, it's I really, if I do try to buy a dress or whatever, it's like impossible. I can't figure it out. Like who's walking around like this? But they are. And so yes, you would want to encourage family. I totally agree. But there's something like like your face and your phone all the time, everything. There's just, you know, we're at this point getting merged with cyberspace. So we're not even like we're past procreating. We can't even retain our own humanity, I feel like.
Wow, that's profound. That's the most intelligent thing this entire broadcast was just that sentence. That was
thank you. I was like, where was I going with this? But no, that is where I was going. So yeah, but the problem is that we have what I've heard called a pathocracy. So your government is against you. It's not for you. And I feel like somehow that's like related to the separation between nation and state, like the culture, whether it's religion or ethnicity or like to the extent that race or religion is actually integrated with your environment, with like how watery or dry or whatever, that there was a time when there was more cohesion locally, and then you could have a tailor-made government of the people where you would know if it made sense or not. And I don't know if this exists or not exists, but I feel like we've gone beyond where you could have a government for the people in America anyway, in the
Yeah,
United States,
I
I should
wrote
say.
that in my ethics book, Actionable Ethics. And in my ethics book, I talk about like how, like, what was the origin of the nation, right? And so Aristotle says that the nation was the family, the smallest unit, the atom of the nation was the family unit. And then you have a bunch of families and they're related to each other. So they're like cousins. And once you have a bunch of cousins living around each other, you have a tribe. And then when you have a number of tribes together, you have a nation, or kind of like the Bible. They think of the Israelites in the Bible, or the ancient Athenians had a similar social setup. And so when you look at the Greek word for nation, it's ethnos, right? Ethnos, like
Yeah.
ethnicity. Ethnos is nation. And in Latin, natio, where we get the word nation, it's Gnascio, natio, and it's from nascere, which means to be born, and it's the same root word for gene, right? So nation translates as a tribe born to the same gene pool.
Wow.
So that conception of it was your family, that your nation was literally your family. Like they did a study, like in England, that the average Englishman is a 12th cousin of the furthest Englishman
When
from
was
him.
the last time you've been there?
Well, yeah, I'm talking about
Really
ethnic.
looks like it.
I'm not talking about
No, I'm
the
saying
people
there's
who
two
arrived
different.
50 minutes. Oh, you're
Yeah.
talking about the teeth and everything.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah. When you get
and
outside of London, you're like, yes, they do look like they're marrying their cousins. I love
yes,
you all.
well, yes, and Finland, it's a fourth cousin. The furthest a Finn is
Wow.
from any other Finn is fourth cousins, and so there was that component drawing us together as a family unit, and it was very powerful, patria. And so ever since they started breaking that down and they started making multiracial states, which used to be called empires, right? So a republic or democracy, these used to be homogenous states. Empires are multiracial states. And so you have people who don't get along with each other. So they have to suppress consciousness of, material components of who you are, your identity, like suppressing, telling you it's bad, stigmatizing it. And so what they decided to do, I mentioned Adam Smith before, and so they harked back to Adam Smith and they said, okay, so what if we base a society not based on family where people care about each other? What if we make it transactional? And we do it so that, like at the beginning of The Wealth of Nations, he says, the brewer and the cobbler and the farmer, they don't do things just for their own good. They do it because there's enlightened self-interest. And you're doing things for your own enlightened self. You're interacting with other people and you're serving his needs, he's serving yours, and everything kind of works out. And so they made society transactional in a way like we were talking about before, and that kind of strips the soul. It turns it from marriage to prostitution, and now you've got this enlightened self. Greed is good, and it mutates really quickly into that kind of Gordon Gekko type philosophy. So I mean, so is it a logical, rational basis for society to be rival tribes united by a shopping mall? Because what happens when the shopping mall goes down? What happens when the economy ain't so good anymore? Suddenly those old kind of tribal things.
Well, that's the
reemerge.
funny thing. I was just realizing that our conflict, like our political conflict, if you look back in history, a lot of times it was farmers versus city people versus water people versus upland people versus downland people who had the water rights, people wanted them like that. Because I went to law school and the cases, like the precedents and stuff, come from real disputes, like who owns this water that flows, like it's real stuff.
Yeah.
And now I feel like it's ideological crap just totally generated by propaganda, because we're all just, producing, consuming machines, like maws with thumbs. Like that's all we are. We all have the same desires and are just, it's just nothing. It no longer has any meat on those bones. But there is one thing, and I have this book called The Church and the Libertarian, there is one thing that could transcend that, and it would be religion. So I'm always been a staunch observer, believer, advocate, defender of separation of church and state and everything in the First Amendment. But it was revealed to me, I think, in that book that it's not, when you have a confessional state or whatever, it's not that you go and kill people who aren't Catholic or whatever. That's certainly not the Catholic way, but it's that the laws are informed by this coherent, vetted, long-standing, cohesive moral system. And you can live there if you're not part of that religion. That doesn't matter. It's just you have to accept that, like, abortion is not going to be legal. Like, don't try to proselytize against it, or don't try to advocate against it, to make it legal, because that would be disruptive and you would be punished for that. And it was just, it was an eye opener for me, because, and some people think it could happen here, and I absolutely don't think so. And it certainly wouldn't be Catholic if it was here. And the guy whose brainchild Catholic integralism in the U.S. is the same guy who co-wrote the how to deal with conspiracies memo with Cass Sunstein under Obama. The guy's Adrian Vermeule. So that's definitely a psyop. But the idea, psyops don't work if there isn't some kernel of truth in it. The idea that there would be a framework that's clearly delineated. That's one thing I like about Catholicism as compared to a lot of other religions. It's very clearly delineated what you're supposed to do, what you're not supposed to do, why, what the story is. And, maybe any major well-established ethical system would work that way. But anyway, would that be the answer?
Yeah, in my ethics book, just to go back to that, I talk about that. It was called the Axial Age. And the Axial Age is when all the great religions, Islam, Christianity, Judaism, like all these, Zoroastrianism. And before the rise of the Axial Age, before the rise of these great belief systems, in the Roman Empire, it was Stoic philosophy. So it doesn't have to be a religion. It just has to be a belief system that kind of everybody agrees to certain basic tenets of it. And so for the first time in human history, they call them cooperation zones, right? We would call them empires, right? So a cooperation zone would be like Christendom, right? So you have a bunch of different countries, but they're cooperating. They have one culture, one basic culture. And so it broke the 100,000 mile square kilometer, kind of threshold for the first time in human history, when you had a religion that overcame differences in race, differences in language, differences in culture, if you have this religion. But here's the pity is they took that away. So religion, but the term religion, by the way, is religio. So think ligature. A ligature is something you tie, right? You're tying a ligature. Religio, it means that which binds us together. Religion is that which binds us together. So when you get rid of that, suddenly we're not together anymore. We're all, I'm a Muslim, I'm a Buddhist, I'm a Jew, and they all have different competing moral systems. Some do not extend moral status to others. Like, say I'm a Muslim and you're an infidel, I am allowed. There was a woman at Georgetown, a professor had, and is a male, and he said it is justified for a Muslim to rape or enslave an infidel. And he was backed up by a female Muslim who was saying, "Oh yeah, it's okay to rape you." So you're allowing in people who don't buy into your larger social system. And there are Aristotle talked about that. He kind of mentioned the libertarian thing. He said, if you have a foreigner and they're in your culture, that's fine, as long as they observe your culture, as long as they, kind of understand that there's certain baseline rules. He said, if they do not, however, if they work against your culture, if they work against your ethics and your moral system, he said they have to be invited to leave. And he said, because they will erode rule of law. And he said, if they do not leave, then you have to deal with them in the historically normal way. Because they're pernicious. You have chaos. You basically have chaos. And that's where we are now with globalization, is you've taken everything that binds us together and you've erased it, especially in the post-World War II period, because they're afraid of nationalism, Karl Popper and all this. If we have people coming together, that's going to cause Hitler. So we need to do all these things to divide the populace in very many ways. And in my book, I mentioned that James Madison in Federalist 10, he mentions that. He says, oh, well, what great luck for us that the United States is so big, because it is so variegated and the people are so just with different interests in different regions and different cultures that they can never unite to challenge the government. So he would have been on board with the FBI doing psyops and going online and dividing us. Oh, Hitler or anti-Hitler, or Antifa, Black Lives Matter. He would have been all into that, because their model is to keep the people divided and conquered. And so that's what we have to deal with. Do we want to live in a society that relies on division and discord? Or do we want a society that relies on unity and cohesion and family? And, and we've been told all our lives, oh, the latter is Hitler and bad and evil. We want to live in Detroit. Detroit is the optimal society. And I'm not so sure that that's true.
Well, I feel like they have united us in that we are just very similarly shaped cogs in this system, and that they really go out of their way to accentuate and volatilize or whatever, like spark differences so like the people say, oh, the Democrats and Republicans, they're more far apart than ever. Of course they're not. They're closer together than ever. The welfare warfare super state is both you couldn't tell the difference. And the people's interests are actually, I think, rather aligned. Like, we are all going to lose our humanity.
Oh, they're
and
terrified.
I think people know it. Yeah.
They're terrified of that. Like, I did several presentations on Occupy Wall Street. So after the 2008 financial collapse, by 2011, you had these protests and people were talking about, oh, the 1% versus us, the 99%. They got very scared. And I was shown charts like Google Ngram. Like, once that started happening and this class clash started forming, coalescing, all of a sudden a switch was pushed. And you could see by 2012, all of a sudden, white supremacy, white privilege, like they started race baiting because they wanted to change what was inherently a class issue into a race issue to get us to fight each other and not them.
Obama was extremely instrumental in that. I have read a few. This is when Bill Cosby had to be taken down. I was reading stuff from back then or if you watch the show Boondocks, which is a really outrageous cartoon, it's so raw. And I believe it was before, around the Obama time, I think Black people and white people were becoming aware of the nature of the division and the stratification and everything as a top-down mechanism to keep some people down just because that's the way hierarchy works. Like, I don't even necessarily think it's racist. I just think it was racial, but it's just, if you read the report from Iron Mountain, like, they need to do things like that. And Obama came in with all this like hope and everything. And
when did he come in?
2008.
2008, during the financial collapse.
Yeah.
So you wonder, did he really get elected? Did Mitt Romney actually? And there's evidence that Mitt Romney actually won.
Oh, wow. Really?
But they needed a Black president to race bait to change
They needed it, and they got it. And what it did was it made the racial conversation so much worse. It made the thing so much worse. And similarly,
Trayvon could have been my son.
Yes, and Eric Holder was caught red-handed going down there, stoking flames of that, and I mean, that was don't even get me started on that. I was following it closely. Like, it was just manufactured out of whole cloth. But Trump similarly hijacked the Ron Paul movement. So Ron Paul won Iowa in 2012. And, you can think libertarianism, whatever, is a weapon used to promote this kind of transactional culture. But Ron Paul, he may even have been planted. But if that's what if that's the plant you have to give me, I will take it.
Because I like Ron Paul.
Yeah, he was defending the Bill of Rights. And the first thing I said when Trump came along is he never talks about the Bill of Rights. He does not care about our foundational principles, and we need those foundational principles back, or we're not going to come out of this. And so I think, maybe Obama was the solution for what was happening on the left, And Trump obviously was hijacking the zeitgeist or the energy that Ron Paul was delivering on the right, where people were like, "Hey, we need a return to fundamentals." And yeah, I think they're way ahead of quashing any kind of coherent, justifiable rebellion.
Yeah, well, excuse me, it was Iceland. Iceland arrested their bankers
Yes.
after 2008. Why? Because they were a homogenous society. In a diversity state, they can just push a button and do a push button race riot, and then the
Yeah.
bankers get away. Which is why
Yeah.
they're exporting this model to Europe now, where they're trying to create the
Yeah.
demographics of the United States because they're used to that ruling model. So now they're outsourcing it to different societies, and they're just they're destroying these societies on purpose to make them not
Yeah.
functional and incoherent. And Tower of Babel, when God wanted to destroy Nimrod and his ability to make a ziggurat up to the sky, he introduced diversity, and suddenly everything breaks apart. Nobody can agree on anything. The civilization collapses. And so that's kind of, like I said before, the choice is, do we live in a society that, like Empedocles said, there's two great energies in the universe. One is love, which is the creative impulse, the creative energy, brings things together, or discord, which brings things apart. And so we used to have, under Christendom, it was this concept of bringing people together, religio, the binding of people together. And under the post kind of Reformation period has been rule by division. The James Madison, oh, isn't it great? People are divided. We can get away with stuff because they're going to
That
be so divided
was
to foster
that
that.
was the Sykes-Picot, I think,
Mhm.
agreement was based on that theory, that if they ran lines through tribes and made patchwork countries,
Mhm.
it would keep the Middle East from cohering. And I think it did work, but then it backfired in that secularization was the one thing that could be an overlay to that patchwork. So then they decided to go back and kind of reinvigorate tribalism in the Middle East.
Because you can play people off against each other if you have this fake country with an
Yeah.
imaginary line, and we're going to call it Iraq, but the people there
Yes.
didn't create it.
And you have to do
And
what the top-down laws control you, even though you live in a mountain and you live on a desert. That it's just a natural
and you
recipe.
didn't come up with the laws or anything. Yeah, like Africa, like we create this country called Nigeria, and the people who live there, they've never heard of Nigeria. They're like, Niger, that's not even our language. That's from Latin, the black place.
I know.
And they're like, I'm the Mafumbo tribe. I'm not a Niger.
Yeah,
Like
I
that's
know.
something you made up.
In Atlanta,
Yeah.
I had a black guy call and correct me for saying Niger instead of Niger. And I was like, are you literally defending the French colonists? Like, are you
Yeah,
kidding me?
exactly.
I mean,
Pronounce it authentically after the Parisian.
right, we're French, gosh darn it. Like,
Exactly.
okay.
No, it's like, yeah, whatever. But that's the British imperial model, is a division and using, like I was talking to a Canadian politician, and he's a very, very nice man, but I was telling him that I was reading this book by Holger Hook, I think it was his name. He's a German historian, and he wrote this book called like Scars of War, and it was about the American Revolutionary War and all the violence that was attendant that nobody talks about. And one of the things that was interesting to me was he talked about how the British Empire would basically race bait. They would use they're a tiny island, so they don't have a lot of people, so they've got to rely on diversity. So they would bring in people from different races to basically be capos, because they would be crueler to the populace. Like if you had an American colonist ruling, he might have sympathy for the other American colonists. So no, bring in someone from London. Or they would bring in Holger Hook points out that they would bring in Afro-Caribbean, like black guys, to whip white people at Copley Square in Boston.
George
They
Soros.
would pay the Native Americans to scalp colonists. They brought in Hessian soldiers from Germany. So they would use diversity as a war tactic.
Yeah.
And so the founding fathers, when they wrote the Declaration of Independence, that's one of the reasons why they rebelled. And they say it right in the Declaration of Independence. They said, because of merciless savages that you're paying to basically rape and kill us.
I think that happened in World War II. I think they brought in, I have this book, Backdoor to War, that talks about that. As late as that, brought in particularly brutal tribe of Africans I'll find the reference. Keep
Well,
going.
yeah, look at all the Indians that are being like installed, and you're like, oh, it's the Prime Minister of Ireland. Oh, he's an Indian. Oh, it's the Prime Minister of Scotland. He's an Indian. Oh, it's Sadiq Khan. He's an Indian.
I mean,
Oh,
it's
it's the
so
guy in Wales. He's an
obvious.
Indian. Oh,
Yeah.
Vivek Ramaswamy. It's an Indian. Oh, Nikki Haley. They love this is the British imperial model. They will install all these people because they can rely on them to be brutal because they don't have a connection. Look at Vivek Ramaswamy. He's tanking in the polls now because he basically he said the quiet part out loud. He was like, I think you're lazy and stupid, and I want to replace you all with H-1Bs. I'm here to better people in India, not you. I'm going to give your jobs to those Indians because my people is them, not you. You know, so he said it out loud.
Trump
and now
says
he's
stuff
tanking.
like that, and somehow it moves on to the things that are okay to say. Like, I cannot believe that people who used to have a grounding in religion or the Constitution are they
That's
still
not Trump.
supporting what Trump says?
That's not Trump. And Trump, by the way, ran on the opposite. If you remember, Trump ran on the forgotten man. And I'm going to bring manufacturing jobs, like Ben Shapiro alluded to, manufacturing jobs. You know, so Trump was like, okay, I'm going to be here for the working class. I'm going to be the champion of the working class. Vivek did the opposite. He's like, I hate the working class. I'm replacing you all. And I'm like, okay, that's not representative government. Representative government, which is what we're supposed to have, is not British people ruling Indians. It's not Indians ruling Chinese. It's supposed to be Irish ruling Irish. So if your concept is, oh, I'm an Indian and I have no loyalty to you and I'm just going to get rid of you all, that's not representative government. That's conquest.
Right. But I wonder if he was saying that out loud to get us used to that thought, because that idea of bringing manufacturing back is ridiculous. Why would we want that? Like, you would want it if you are headed towards a great war and you have autarky, you know, and that may be the thing. And trade wars, like everything seems to be like getting rid of the super low end workers. Like if you expel like the produce workers and stuff and immigration, like that all sounds like we are shutting the air travel problems. Like we're going to close ranks or whatever like that. So it could have been that. But as far as like a selling point to say bringing back manufacturing, the whole thing that we were sold from the beginning is how is your productivity. Like Ben Shapiro said, like you're just sitting around doing nothing basically. And so I never understood that.
But if that's true, if we're just sitting around doing nothing, if you look at our productivity charts from like the 1910s on, and they've tracked this, starting in the 1970s, the average American worker is 4 times more productive because we have email, we have fax machines, we have all these technologies that make us vastly more productive than our grandparents and great-grandparents. So we're actually more productive. So it's not oh, you're just lazy and sitting around. It's actually the opposite. And for the first time, I have a friend who's at the Central Bank of Canada, and he sends me white papers and stuff. Oh, Daniel, this is the Bank of International Settlements, what they're saying. But we have great conversations, and he was like, Daniel, check out this website, like what WTF 1971, I think it was. And so in 1971, they decoupled all the way till 1971, your pay was tracked with your productivity. So the more productive you were, the more you worked, the more you got paid, which makes sense. That's what we were sold, right? That pull yourself up by your bootstraps, just work harder and you'll earn more money. But in 1971, because of technology, we became 4 times more productive, but we did not get paid 4 times more money, right? So that those extra multiples were taken from the worker and given up to the C-suite. And you can see that it was $50 trillion.
Yes.
Somebody actually tracked the money. $50 trillion was stolen from the middle class and made billionaires and now trillionaires like Elon Musk. He's projected to be the world's first trillionaire. Or look, they use the money, a lot of it, to build out Asia, to build out the infrastructure, you know, to ship our manufacturing over to Asia, their roads and their airports. That was stolen money from the American. Imagine if all those people had the money that they had earned and generated. Imagine they could have 10 kid families.
A flat tax rate would have done it too. The progressive tax rate also has that impact. But I will
I'm just pushing back on the myth of the lazy American.
No, we're not lazy. No, Americans are not lazy. And if I said it like that,
no, I know you did.
Americans,
Elon Musk and Vivek.
Yeah, Americans are super hardworking, and other countries say stuff like that. Like if you're talking like, oh my gosh, I thought I was going to come here and the streets were paved with gold, but like you have to mine the gold. Like it's super hard and very stressful. Our standards are high.
We take no vacation time relative to like the rest of the world.
100%.
We work to a later age. So these people coming, these like in their little bubbles, like the Ben Shapiro's, and they're like, you shouldn't be able to retire, and it's like they're so contemptuous of like working people. They're so decoupled from them. They've never met a working
That's
person.
the progressive income tax makes me crazy because let's define rich as idle rich. Rich people don't pay income tax. Income tax is 100% connected exclusively to people who work. That's how it's defined. That's what makes me crazy because my husband and I both went to school till we were 30
Mhm.
and had all those school loans, which are not tax deductible. And the day we got out of school, our tax rate was unbearable. Like in New York City, my tax rate was over 50%, and I had hundreds of thousands of dollars of school loans. But this gets back to that productivity. You could say, well, it's not stolen from you because that technology has nothing to do with you. I went to school till I was 30, and I paid for it myself. Like I made the machine that can do this stuff, which is kind of crazy that podcast instead of have a real job. But my husband has a real job and he works like a dog, and it would be impossible for us to raise kids and both have jobs like that. That's another thing. It makes it impossible, like not having any of that surplus, whether it's the actual productivity or the progressive tax rate, which is an abomination, and you cannot deduct your state taxes from your federal taxes. So you're literally double tax. It's insane. But that I think is all intentional so that the most productive people have to outsource raising their kids, have to never get involved in any kind of politics, can't even follow politics, can't even sometimes vote. My husband rarely has the opportunity to go to a voting, but like unless you work for the government, they don't give you time to go to the voting booth. So yes, it feels rather it's like another way to maximize the work that a slave will do. So the progressive tax rate is a way of maximizing the work that a slave will do. But this idea of honing yourself to be able to handle this kind of machinery and then working it until you're spent, you have Alzheimer's or whatever, and that's it. I certainly don't want to get black-pilled, Daniel. That is neither my style.
Well, that like Aristotle talks about that in chapter 5 of Politics. The section is called How a Tyranny is Maintained. And he says it is in the interest of the tyrant to make everybody as poor as possible so that they're busy working for their daily bread and they can't pay attention to the tyrant. So they use poverty strategically to keep us at a subsistence, level, and they use taxation. And in this case, like there's very strong arguments to be made. Like you mentioned, our taxes, we're being, taxed on our labor. There was a court case in Kentucky back in I think of the 40s, and there was a guy named Long. His initials were LLL, and his last name was Long. You can look it up. But he made the case. He was talking to them, and he said, okay, and this is in The Wealth of Nations, by the way. If you read The Wealth of Nations by Adam Smith, he defines income. So he says there's 3 different ways to make revenue, and he said from property, the income from that is called a rent, right? And then he talks about the income from labor is wages, right? The income from labor is wages, and the income from lending money is called income, right? So if you're making money off of a stock or off of a bond or off of a
interesting,
he said that is actually what is definitionally income, and it's in The Wealth of Nations. So this guy made the case. He said I make my money not through stocks and bonds and loaning money.
Wages.
I make it through labor, which means I have wages, not income. And he won the case. So the income tax was originally called the millionaire tax, and it was originally
I know this.
Yeah. And so what they actually were taxing at first was the stocks and bonds of rich people. They were not taxing the labor of workers. That happened after the World War II period, right? So they had this tax, which they did have a tax on wages as a war measure, but then it sunsetted out, and they were like, okay, so do we tell the people that it sunsetted out, and they no longer have to pay this tax on their wages? And they were like, no, just keep sending out the tax forms and let's see if they keep paying.
Oh, I didn't know.
And the people kept paying. Yeah. And so there's a great documentary called America from Freedom to Fascism with Aaron Russo. And
yes, of course. I've seen that. I have all 3 of them on CD. His 3 things: Century of the South.
Oh, that's a great one.
and there's another one. I forget which one the
Yeah.
third one was.
But that's, I mean, they're using, kind of illegal means to, and I truly do believe that it is strategic. I think it is illegal. I think they know what they're doing. Like, for instance, Trump talks about tariffs and the use of tariffs. And he just the other day, he said, oh, we're making so much through tariffs, we can get rid of the income tax. Now, what he just admitted to, if you go to our Constitution, which you said, oh, people should be quoting the Constitution more. Our Constitution says the federal government should be funding itself through tariffs, excise taxes, and duties. There is no federal income tax. They're supposed to be making their money through tariffs. And for the first, 150 years of our history, more actually, that's how the federal government, all of DC was built on tariffs, excise taxes, and duties. And then the British Empire essentially takes the United States back over economically. And they're like, okay, we want to erase borders, which means we want to erase tariffs. Okay, so then how does the government fund itself? Let's institute this federal income tax. They instituted it in England just a couple years before they did it in the United States in 1913. I think it was like 1907 in England. And so then they rolled it out here. Problem is, it's unconstitutional here. In the 19th century, they ruled 2 times, the Supreme Court, that a federal income tax was unconstitutional.
Because of the apportionment? Was that the
yeah,
thing?
It was the apportionment issue, but it's also double taxation, which is also unconstitutional. Because if you're living in, I am living in South Carolina. That's where I currently am. Do I owe taxes in Vermont? No,
Yes, you do.
I do
You
not.
shouldn't.
I do not owe taxes in Vermont
Yeah.
because I don't live there. I'm not a resident there, right?
Right.
So I am a citizen of South Carolina legally. That's where I'm domiciled, South Carolina. So I owe taxes in South Carolina. I do not owe taxes in Alaska. I do not owe, different jurisdiction, right? So why the original federal income tax was, there are certain regions that are not within the 50 states. Like DC is not within the 50 states. Puerto Rico, Guam, the US Virgin Islands, military bases overseas, they're not within the 50 states. So they're like, okay, well, how do we fund these? Okay, we're going to create a federal income tax if you're in federal jurisdiction, which makes sense. But if I live in District of Columbia, I don't also owe taxes in New Jersey, because I'm paying my taxes in the District of Columbia. So I legitimately, because I'm in federal territory, I owe a federal tax.
And
so they're double taxing everything.
The federal taxes they cannot actually even spend all the federal taxes on the federal government. They have to give it back to the states. That's what they do. I'm just saying, they don't have the expenses for it. The tax is its own purpose. The purpose of the tax is to tax you, not to raise money, because they turn around and give it back.
Well, they take everything is treasury bonds and stuff. The actual way that the government funds itself is through debt.
Yeah.
It is not through like the Church Commission.
But then
Reagan did that. Not a nickel goes to the things that you assume it's going to.
Yeah, the federal budget is almost all like Social Security and Medicare and Medicaid and stuff.
Well, not even. I mean, he said that, like, the Church Commission said almost all of it is absorbed in covering the cost of the debt. So they'll take out debt, they'll take out loans, and then they've got to do those transfer payments, or they've got to service.
Oh, I see what you're saying. So it's not just
absorbed.
the interest; it's actually repaying. But if you look at where the interest is going,
they're taking out loans to pay for this stuff.
Or
what you just did. There was this gentleman, I can't remember his name right now off the top of my head, but he was talking about the audit that the Treasury did, and they were talking about, okay, what are the biggest assets the United States has? And you would think, okay, well, maybe all that wetland, maybe oil.
I thought it was land.
Gold.
Yeah, I would think it was land.
It is not. It's student loan debt. So what they want, the government is basically getting people in debt, and then they're selling that debt on the secondary markets to hedge funds and private equity firms and everything else. So they're encouraging these young kids to get into debt because it's so lucrative to sell.
That's the thing.
That's how they're funding stuff.
Your first act as an adult in this country, your first act is to put yourself into a lifetime of debt. You are not old enough to drink. You are probably, really, you start school kind of before you're 18, I think. I don't know if you graduate when you're 18. I'm trying to think. Yeah, I was not 18 when I, I don't know.
You're a fractional citizen. Like you know how they say in the Constitution, oh, blacks were 3/5 of a person. That's called a fractional citizen. And children are fractional citizens. So they're nominal citizens of the United States, but they cannot vote. They cannot fight in a war. They cannot enter into a contract because they're fractional citizens. So if you're 18 years old, you can't legally drink. You're still a fractional citizen. So how can you enter into a contract if your brain is not formed enough to drink responsibly? How could you enter a contract responsibly? And the answer is you can't. And they know that. They know that, like, the human brain.
It's like the trans stuff.
25.
They deliberately target underdeveloped people because fully developed people won't do it.
Mm-hmm.
You just couldn't throw them in. So I want to circle back to our meditations. I have that being too abrupt. I did not mean to be abrupt.
You're
So
never abrupt.
I am.
That was a good segue. That was a good segue.
I try to have, there you go. I try to have good, that's context and continuity was what was the first and last thing I was taught in radio. But so the thing about meditations, I loved how we started, and you said basically before the Reformation, the church was, or Christianity was Neoplatonism and Stoicism, essentially.
Yeah.
And so Meditations by Marcus Aurelius is a exposition of Stoicism.
Mhm.
And the thing, so it really resonated with me from the virtue point of view, but it lacked a few things, and they're fatal flaws. To not
Yeah,
have,
there's no nude scenes, there's no pop-ups.
there's no,
It's
yeah, I
very
actually
disappointing.
hate sex in books. But I did look up Marcus Aurelius's personal life, and apparently he had his wife's lover executed and made her bathe in his blood. So this is the guy who's like, don't let things, don't be too uptight about stuff. Let stuff roll.
I've never heard that. So that's you know how like enemies will tell stories about,
could be
like,
apocryphal.
So
Yes,
yeah, you never know.
could be.
Could be true
But,
now.
yeah, it could be true. But it's just funny because I'll do that with people. I'll look them up like, did you really live this way? Anyway, so he says, like, don't let things get you down. But
Mhm.
but without rewards and punishments, without hope, without a higher purpose, I feel like it's hard to avoid vice and embrace virtue. It can be its own reward. I agree with you there. But I think on the margin, it's hard to really control your impulse to slit your wife's lover's throat and make her bathe in his blood. And it's sad. It's like you're gonna die, so you should be happy you're not dead, or you should be happy you're gonna die because then you'll be dead. There was a lot of that, and it kind of got me down. And I feel like he would have benefited from a little hope.
There's a book called God, who was it? It's Ammon Hillman, and it's something called, I think it's called The Chemical Muse. And in there he talks about Marcus Aurelius being medicated on opiates, heroin.
Yes. Yeah.
So just try to work some heroin into your regimen. And
I was gonna say, yeah, actually that may have been the thing. This
Smack.
is just a pipe dream. It's just him saying,
Well,
"Hey, man."
it's a god. Gibbon, by the way, just to do a counterpoint on Marcus Aurelius's character, Gibbon said that Marcus Aurelius was the first Roman emperor since, like Augustus or something, that was sexually normal. That he was, faithful to his wife. He wasn't into boys or anything, so he actually, he was the philosopher king. He was, and he was very, very loving of his people. I mean, like a lot of this stuff, a lot of the rules and stuff that he made, we would think of as very enlightened and tolerant and stuff like that for the time period.
Yes, he talks a lot about how your purpose, your actualization should be in the community and serving the community and doing what's right for the society, for the community. And the problem with that, first of all, he was the emperor, so of course that's going to be his point of view. But our community is pathological. I don't want to serve my community.
We don't have a community.
Yeah, we don't have a community. That's right. There's no community. There's nothing. You would just be giving. You'd be the best you can do, I feel like, is conserve your energy for your family and the people you know personally are worthy of it. Otherwise, you dissipate that, and that's bad.
Yeah, and you get like sociopathic people who take and take and take and don't give back. Whereas if you had like a family style civilization, it's kind of like, air conditioning. If the windows are closed, the air conditioning circulates, everybody gets cool. If somebody opens all the windows, then the air conditioning is just going out. Nobody's getting cool. And it's kind of like that. So if you're giving and giving, giving, and the other people you're giving to are not giving back, and it's not a reciprocal relation, it's kind of like Christians find themselves in that situation with other religions. Let's just put it there, where the Christian is expected to give and give and give, and often does, and the other religions are like,
Well,
"I will rape and enslave you."
yeah, we're like the
It's like,
only ones. It's quite like the fatal
yeah,
flaw
the only one. Yeah,
that have and I've actually said this, that I think the most unique there's no such thing as most unique, but a unique element and a fundamental element of Christ's message was no more in-group out-group.
well,
Once
is that true though?
well, a couple of things
I think he was quite racist.
do well. I mean, he did have that thing, like, if g- tell him he's doing
In Matthew, when he doesn't want to help in Matthew, I think she's Phoenician, and then somebody else describes her as Syrian in Luke, and because Syria at that time was kind of Syro-Phoenician, so they describe her variously, but she's a foreigner, and so the disciples, I should say, they're like, hey, you want us to tell her to beat it because she's a foreigner, she's trying to talk to you, and the lady has a sick daughter, and Jesus doesn't want to help her because she's foreign. And he explicitly says to the disciples at the beginning of their ministry, do not preach to the Gentiles or the Samaritans. This is for the children of Israel. And he says it to the foreign woman.
wow,
He
I did
says,
not. How do I miss that? They don't say
Matthew,
that in the
is it
gospel
Matthew
at church.
22? Yeah, because
I've
I'm
never
reading the
heard
Bible,
that.
reading the Bible now. So he tells her, it is not meet for me. It is not proper for me to give the bread from the children of Israel to dogs. And she says, but
Whoa.
even the little dogs get the scraps. And you have to understand that dogs were unclean animals, and they still use dogs as a slur in the Middle East. Go home, Yankee dog. That's a very big Semitic slur. And so he basically calls her a dog, calls her kid a dog. In Acts, in the book of Acts, they address this. Paul is the first one to
Yeah, I was gonna say Paul's all over it.
Yeah,
He's
so
like,
Paul
come on,
is the
Gentiles, come on, come on,
he's
come
the
on, come on.
apostle of the Gentiles. And so Paul, for the first time, and it even says there, it says that it is inappropriate for a Jew to come into contact with Gentiles because it pollutes them. It uses the word pollute. And he said, so this is what we believed up till now, but now there's this new doctrine where, God is saying it's no longer unclean to come into contact with Gentiles. So
But this was Paul
that was
made that up?
decades after Jesus. So Jesus's time period, that doctrine had not come
So
into.
Jesus was saying all Jews have to follow me, and only Jews.
Yeah, children of
And then
Israel.
that
I
was the
came for the children
new.
of Israel.
So this is obviously, this shocks people, weirds them out, but it's obviously true that Jesus, claiming to be the Jewish Messiah, the followers of Jesus would be, in that context, considered Jews, or the heirs to that legacy.
Yeah, that's what
And
Paul
rejecting
says.
him is a rejection of it.
Yeah, so
But
Paul is the one who says we're no longer under the law, because he's trying to make his appeal to the Gentiles, and they don't want to get circumcised real bad. They real bad. So the religion's not going to get too much traction. So he's got to make this ideological pivot and say that we're really not under the law, we're under faith. And you see the differences between Catholicism and Protestantism right there, where the Catholics are kind of drawn from the synoptic gospels, where they basically believe that if you're a good person, you do good things. Like the rich man comes up to Jesus and says, Jesus, how do I get eternal life? And Jesus tells him, don't steal, don't lie, honor your mother and your father. So he basically tells him the 10 commandments, and you'll be fine spiritually. And by the book of John, the fourth book, it changes. And it's no longer good acts will, conduce to your benefit in the afterlife, but it is belief in Jesus. If you have faith in Jesus, then you'll be saved, as opposed to you do good acts. So Catholics are trained to do good acts.
yes,
To be a good person. Protestants are trained, just have faith.
by
The
faith
acts
alone.
are decoupled. Yeah, like Martin Luther in 1517, his war against Hellenization, his war against Aristotle. He says, that ethics is the greatest enemy of grace, because ethics teaches you that good behavior will, conduce to you getting to heaven or something. So he's like, we have to stop teaching ethics and just teach people grace. And now we're in the society where nobody teaches ethics. So we're in a highly immoral society because Protestantism threw ethics out. So I don't know.
I just read Makers of the Modern Mind by Thomas Neal. Did you ever read that? It's
No.
really good. As I read it on my show, it was like 30 chapters, but It was the 12 makers of the modern mind, and not like the 12 greatest thinkers of the modern era. No, the makers of the modern mind. And one of them was Luther. This is a Catholic
Yeah.
guy, Thomas Neal, wrote in the 50s. He's a professor. And he said Luther had demons and he didn't want to be held responsible for that. He had to change. He was forced to be a priest, I think, for some reason, like he made some whatever. Anyway, he was a reluctant priest and he wanted to rewrite the rules because he couldn't live up to them. So that would explain it.
Yeah, very early on in the Protestant Reformation, there's a guy named Bernard Mandeville. And Bernard Mandeville wrote something called, I think it's called The History of the Bees or something. It was in the 1600s, and he was a Dutchman who moves to England. And he's very interesting because he's the first guy who articulates that vice is good because it's good for the GDP. And he said things that were stigmatized under Catholicism, like gluttony and greed and lust. He was like, these are actually, advantageous because it drives the economy. And you still see this rationale among Protestantism in like American culture, that vice is good, greed is good. The Gordon Gekko speech from Wall Street that Oliver Stone wrote to basically articulate that this is not a good guy. He's an evil man. And he was shocked when all these
people loved it.
Yeah, greed is good. Greed. He's missing the whole point. He's supposed to be evil, but what he didn't understand was that is a very old Protestant strain. That vice is actually good. So you have these people who believe in vice, and they think, okay, I can be a horrible person, but if I have grace and I believe in Jesus, but I'm still ripping people off and doing horrible things in my community, turning the world into Detroit, but I'll still get into heaven because of because I believe in Jesus.
I don't know what you think about Opus Dei, but I feel like Franco used it to promote the economy and said, hey, a little vanity, a little pride, a little materialism could go a long way in juicing the Spanish economy.
I'll have to look into that because I'm generally I know very little about the time period. I've only read like Orwell's account of the Spanish Civil War, or William Guy Carr wrote this wonderful book called Pawns in the Game, and he goes through various coups and revolutions throughout history, starting with the French Revolution, and he goes to the Spanish Civil War, and the way he describes it was, and this is true, you can see pictures of this, the Republicans, the communists, the Bolsheviks, they were basically raping nuns, killing priests, hanging their bodies over, like desecrating temples and stuff, churches. And so it was really a war against Christianity that was masked as, oh, it's a war against capitalism, but the first thing they attack is the church. And they attack public morality, and they
Who was behind that, do you think?
The communists. Oh, they had people, William Guy Carr talks about, they had people flown in from Moscow. So these weren't even Spaniards. Wow. These were like, people from a different culture coming in who hate Christianity, and they want to destroy and dynamite Christianity because that's the old.
And that would be where Spain and Italy. Italy, another thing that came up in this book was that Italy was the only place in Europe that absolutely rejected Calvinism. And that's why their economy never really, they're still kind of backwards. But of course, it makes it the best place.
I used to believe that, and my ethics book, I praise Protestantism, but now that I'm studying kind of the history of the stuff now, I'm starting to like wonder, because a lot of the economic gains, what we're told is, oh, the Protestant work ethic, and they just worked really hard and they got more money, and there's lazy Southerners. But then when you look at it and you go through the history, for instance, what was the Protestant Reformation? How did that happen? And what actually happened was there was a series of crop failures in the 1500s. And because Christianity basically was based on feudalism, since Justinian, farms and stuff. And it works really good in Southern Europe because there's lots of sun, lots of arable soil. In Northern Europe, where they were they had to live off the seas. They were fishermen. Like you go to the salmon fishing in the Norwegian areas.
Yeah, Ireland, fish and hazelnuts.
Because they couldn't draw anything from the cold, sunless environment.
Yeah.
And so they're trying their best to live a Christian, life based on feudalism and stuff. And they're having crop failures. So all of a sudden the German princes were like, crap, we're about to be overthrown by the peasants. There's these peasant revolts. What are we going to do? How are we going to get through this? So what they do is they ransack the church and they steal all the wealth from the Catholic Church. And then they were like, okay, now we're good because we've stolen all this wealth. So there was this tsunami of wealth, this wealth transfer. Like for instance, Oliver Cromwell's great-great-grandparents, they made their money on stealing church properties. Winston Churchill's great-great-grandparents became rich. There was this.
I mean, I'm an anti-fan of him, but wow,
yeah, me too. And so you look at all the British, look at, let's go to Downton Abbey. Why is it called Abbey? Oh, because it was a Catholic abbey.
Oh
It was a stolen
gosh.
church.
Oh my
So
God.
you look at all the mansions of all these like rich people, and it was stolen abbey, stolen church, stolen
I
monastery.
assumed that's why Protestantism caught on, because they
Yeah.
could just, that's how they got to steal everything.
Yeah, they got to steal everything, and then they created this narrative of, oh, well, we did it because we had doctrinal disputes with them, but that wasn't true at all. That was their ideological cover for basically stealing. So they got rich not off of the Protestant work; they got rich off of stealing.
Nice.
And Queen Elizabeth, John Maynard Keynes did the study of Queen Elizabeth. She got £640,000 from Sir Francis Drake, and he would sail around in the Golden Hind, and he would pirate ships. He would steal, galleons from Spain, France, Portugal, and he got £640,000, gives it to Queen Elizabeth. She pays off her debts in Europe, and then she uses the remainder to found the British East India Company. So that wealth that was accrued was not through hard work and thrift and Protestant. It was through theft and piracy, because what had happened after they leave Christendom, which is the Catholic Church, they leave Christendom, they revert back to the piracy model that they had before Christendom, when they were Vikings, and they made their living through the sea and through trade rather than through wealth creation. Not wealth creation, but wealth extraction is what the model became.
Here's the problem is that, or what I always thought, I just imagined, and maybe it's true, maybe it's not, but that the individualism, the concept of individuality, like libertarianism, whatever, had to have emerged in Europe because there was this competition between church and state that allowed you to understand that you were an individual who had worth, who were, just to see the nature of the hierarchy, unlike in a place like China where you can't, couldn't even imagine something outside that system. And that the church, just separate from that thought, but that the church and the state were in competition with each other and checked each other. Certainly the church checked the state. So I just watched Beckett with Richard
Paul
Burton
Schofield
and Peter Toole.
Oh, no. Yeah. Oh, I love that.
one.
Yeah, Beckett. Yeah, with Peter O'Toole and Richard
So
Burton.
good. Yeah, Peter O'Toole. So good. And the issue was that Beckett said, you can't try that priest. The church has the right to try the priest, like the military. You can't have it mushing together.
Jurisdictionally.
Yes. And the idea, and at first it's like yucky because the priest was accused of something bad. But of course, if you want to just get rid of the priest and you control the courts, you could accuse him of something bad, pluck him out. Maybe he was causing trouble in a village or something, resisting the crown. And if there's no, real trial or whatever. So like, you don't know if the guy was guilty or not. But the idea that there was pushback against the authority of the king had, I think, a tremendous amount of value. And like my answer to Gordon Gekko's speech has always been, greed is good. It drives productivity. But competition checks greed and allows for even distribution, like just distribution.
Or maybe Christianity checks greed. Capitalism with Christianity works as a moral guardrail. Remove Christianity, it becomes highly predatory, and that's where we are.
Yes, and I guess where I'll bring it down to is it becomes predatory if it is not checked by a recognition of individual human rights, such as don't steal, don't kill, because that's what's happening right now with the empire, both the foreign policy and the domestic policy. There's just no sense of you don't get to kill and steal. It's I'm shocked. I renounce responsibility for. I will never vote in a federal election again. I did not vote for Trump. I usually just vote for Ron Paul. I'm not going to even legitimize this empire as if we are consenting to it, because it does not recognize fundamental human rights.
Yeah, that comes from, there was a guy named Francisco Suarez in Spain in the 1500s, and he was the first guy to articulate the concept of human rights. And he said that human beings have an inherent dignity because they have a little spark of God in them. And so, and so the Spaniards stopped enslaving the Indians at this time period, and they started articulating human rights. And so before the fall of Christendom, before the Protestant Reformation, up into the 1500s, the Catholic canonists They articulated, you are a human being with inherent dignity. You are a human being. After Protestantism, that changes. Protestantism basically said you are a human resource. So basically, think of it like in wealth, right? So you've got an economics background. So wealth can be kind of calculated in three ways, right? So you have like use value, or let's say value can be calculated. You have use value. So if I have an apple, I can eat that apple, right? So I have use value for the apple. Then you have trade value, right? And then you have inherent value, right? So what the Catholic canonists were saying was, you have inherent value as a human being because you have a soul. You are a human being. Protestantism said, okay, you don't. Okay, Protestantism said you have a trade value, and that's called a slave. And we're gonna use the British East India Company, and we're gonna be doing slave transactions. Or you have a use value as a human resource. I can use you. And that's how Ben Shapiro sees you. He sees the world through a user, the way a user, like Mr. Potter is really the hero. Isn't it great how he used people to enrich himself and trash the place? He sees, and that's the basic kind of the poles, the polarity between traditional Catholicism, not what we have now. We kind of, but is human being, are you a human being or are you a human resource?
That
Do you have inherent
really,
value or use value?
yeah, that really implies an other, that you're not, that the human family is in schism, that the people who make these rules don't view us as human beings.
Yeah, because what would bridge that gap between differences in race and culture and ethnicity? It's religion, and they removed that. And so that's what's the dark thing behind the separation of church and state, is you're removing the influence, the moral guardrail that was there. Like in the Middle Ages, there's this great book called I think it's A Rebours by Huysmans, the French writer from the 19th century. And he's writing about Blackbeard, Gilles de Rais. Gilles de Rais was this nobleman, and he fought with Joan of Arc, but then he turns and he starts studying Kabbalah. He gets into magic. He starts violating children and kills 1,000 of them, probably more. And he was depopulating whole villages of their children. And so the peasants go to the secular state, and they're like, you have to help us. This nobleman is killing our children. And they said, we believe you, but if we side with you against him, we're going to be, undercutting our own position and power. So sorry, we really would like to help you, but we can't, because the secular state, we would go against the aristocrats. So what eventually happened was the church got him. The church came in where the secular state failed and couldn't stop Jeffrey Epstein. I mean, you had this moral guardrail that could get Jeffrey Epstein, and now it's gone because we have the separation of church and state. Isn't that wonderful? Because you took away the moral guardrail that would have been there to help the people. Now it's gone, and now you're at the mercy of wolves.
Do you know who? I'm sure you do. Christopher Dawson,
No.
the Catholic philosopher from the 20th century from Europe.
No.
You're welcome.
I will look him up. Okay.
He had some hope when he wrote after World War II that there was some hope for Europe not to end up where it is today, which is what was the writing on the wall. He said, if it re-embraces Catholicism or Christianity, whatever, he said, and it was interesting. And he said, no civilization can grow, can prosper with mixed religion. And when I read it, I was like, okay, maybe I'll, cogitate on that for a while. And then I read that General MacArthur said the same thing. He said the one thing in common with all declining cultures is, or that if he marched into a country to destroy it, whatever, if they had more than one religion, he knew it was doomed. And the idea is, as I thought about it more and more, is that you have to have the same value system to work towards the same goals.
Yep.
And if you're at odds, so you can be a cash cow, you can be milking all the economic pent up value that you have. So you don't see the decline necessarily in your standard of living right away, but it is impossible. That's why I'm starting to not be as afraid of the whole, literally AI new world that is coming, because it is coming and we are not stopping it.
Yeah.
I I was kind of see through, you know, trying to punch through the board here and say it cannot, even if it does last 1,000 years. You know, either way, I don't think if it's 100 years or 1,000 years, I'm not going to live to see the ending of it. But it doesn't seem like something that could survive, both from a point of view of, I mean, it's just not the way human civilization works. It's just not going to last forever. And I have other
it's
reasons
doomed to
think so.
failure. Like
Yeah.
the capitalism thing. And I am a big capitalist. I'm an anti-Marxist. I used to
Yes.
work for an anti-communist organization. And but capitalism decoupled from Christianity gets very dicey. And one of the things that happens by the fourth generation, whenever you industrialize a country, the birth rates start to collapse. Because, you know, you're taking, like, for instance, it's happening in India right now, or China, where you're taking people from the farms where children are a benefit, right? That children are extra labor, right? So the more children you have, the more wealth you have, the more hands you have to help you. And, you know, but when you move into the city, children become a liability. It's very expensive to raise them. So suddenly you go from 10 kids to 2 kids to 1 kid to no kids. And so you see this population collapse, and it happens in all industrialized countries. And so they really have nothing to do. They have no answer for it. They could, like Hungary, they could basically say, okay, we're going to give you less taxes if you have more children. That's the proper way to do it. What they're basically doing is, no, let's just let the population erosion run its course, and we're just going to replace you with Africans or Hindus
Or
and,
robots.
yeah, or robots. And so, which is what they have been saying they've wanted for a long time. I mean, the Georgia Guidestones, we want to get population down to 500
They blew
million.
those up.
So it's gonna, yeah, I know.
They don't
So
want people
I
to see
visited that before they blew
Me
it up,
too,
by
yeah.
the way. I still have the plunger that I use. No. But you were watching the flames from your car, from your house. I was watching the rubble and the
Good for
detritus come down from the Georgia Guidestones. But yeah, I mean, they want you know, mass population collapse. They're not doing anything to stop it because they
No.
want it. They want to shrink global population down. They see us as surplus people, that fiat
Yeah.
currency has created all these surplus people, in the sense of, okay, if you have this poor inner city woman and she doesn't have a husband, in the past, in 1940, she might have had 1 kid. Now with welfare, she can have 10 kids. So those are 9 extra surplus people created by fiat currency.
Yep.
That are now deleted out of, if they have a war or a pandemic or something, they can.
Maybe that's
delete
what the
those people.
fentanyl is for.
Yeah. That, by the way, I mentioned that in 2012, when they started the race baiting after Occupy Wall Street, they also, if you look at the introduction of fentanyl into the working classes, 2012 at hockey sticks. So they did the same thing, the race baiting and the
Yeah, I looked into that.
poison,
There was a hockey stick. I
2012.
thought it was 2014, but
No, it's 2012. I did a
I believe
presentation.
you. Yeah.
I did a whole thing called 2012, the year.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Because I remember looking, I was like, where did this come
waging
from?
war.
Like,
Yeah, they
I've been
started
hanging around
waging
with
war on
drug addicts for
capitalists.
my whole life. Like,
Here in California.
So okay, so I'm going to ask you 2 concluding questions.
Okay.
The first one is, do you have any hope for humanity? Do you think that there's the revelation, you know, and Armageddon? Like, what do you think is the earthly thing that's happening? And do you let it worry you?
I've got a friend who's a futurist, and her name's Norma Owen. Norma, if you're there, hi. And she gave me this book by a woman named Penny Kelly, and I read the book with great interest. I interviewed Penny, very nice woman. In the 1970s, she was under a lot of duress. Her husband left her. She had 4 kids. They went on welfare. And so she thought she was hallucinating when she saw a gaggle of little men in robes. And there was like 5 or 6 of them in her kitchen. And they were no taller than 4'9", like little Jawas from Star Wars or something. And she thought she was hallucinating. And she closes her eyes and she's like, go away, go away, go away. And they go away. 6 months later, they show up again. And she has the same reaction. Go away, go away, go away. I'm just imagining this. 6 months after that, it happens again. And finally, she's like, what do you want? And they tell her, we wanted to show you the future, what is going to happen. And this is the 70s, the 1970s. What is interesting about her book is, and this is why I interviewed her, she describes health passports to get into restaurants after a pandemic, a global pandemic that locks down. She describes corporations using goon squads, like let's call them Antifa and Black Lives Matter, And the corporations will start using these groups to go beat people up and cause chaos and all this kind of stuff. And these are the signs of the times at the end. What the little guys told her was, for 1,500 years, the church ruled your civilization, and that was good because there was a spiritual outlet, and the earth liked that. You had this love energy, and that's what Mother Nature wants. And then you got rid of that, and for 500 years you've been ruled by the nation state. And now the love energy is not so great, but it's still there under the nation state because you have patriotism, where you care about your fellow countrymen. And he said that's going away. And what you're going to have is corporate rule, but it will not last that long. It'll only last a short period of time because it has no love energy, and the earth does not like that. It's pure materialism. It is pure consumerism. There's no spiritual component. The earth will correct. And they told her, you don't want to see the earth correct. This has happened multiple times in human history. They've erased entire civilizations, cataclysms, continental shift. I mean, you do not want to see what is about to happen if you course. So what they said was, you're going to have the rise of corporations ruling things with governments as sock puppets that really don't have any power. They're just shells. And the corporations are really running things with goon squads and everything. And then it collapses because there's no spiritual component. And then on the other side of the collapse, society starts reconstituting itself. And she sees these things called families. And the families are essentially like communities. Like, she said the largest one she saw was like 2,000 people, and they'll trade among each other, but they're very, very suspicious of outsiders. They're very, like, they learned that they got burned by being too trusting in this time period, and they got taken to the cleaners. So she said that if you try to, walk into one of these communities, there's a million guns pointed on you, and they're like, keep moving,
I mean, you can see the seeds of that now.
Yeah. And there's a racial component to what forms on the other side, because families are, people who are related to each other. But nevertheless, you start seeing spirituality start to come back, family come back, like these values that we've been told, are relics of the past and obsolete. And we should just have this transactional prostitute society where you're a human resource rather than a human being. It's good your daughter's a prostitute on OnlyFans. Colleges are teaching that. In Canada, this college course was teaching young girls who were going to college to start OnlyFans channels and stuff like that, to prostitute themselves. And that's coming to an end. And do I believe that what Penny Kelly saw, her visions, are true? I found one of the things was interesting. I'd done several presentations on Alvin Toffler's The Third Wave from 1980. And Toffler's this futurist, and he was talking about future trends. The little guys in robes told her to read Alvin Toffler if she wants to. And I was like, hey, I've read Toffler. This is very interesting. So will that happen? Probably. I can see a scenario where that might unfold,
But do you keep your eyes on the prize of the afterlife, or do you worry overly much about what's to come?
No, I'm on the ride. It is a theme park so far as I'm concerned. I'm enjoying seeing things. I don't get particularly black-pilled because it's always the best of times and the worst of times. Like if I was in, like I'm a big fan, obviously, of Christendom. I'm a big fan of kind of a cohesive society. However, I'm not ignorant of the fact that if I was there, I would probably feel stultified. I would probably feel, so I'm in this gray area where I'm in a nihilistic age, and it is the age of the greatest freedom. So I can participate if I want to participate. I cannot participate if I don't want to participate. So there's a lot of good things. I can walk into a museum and enjoy art or listen to.
Yeah, you and Ben Shapiro, right on, with gratitude. No, I mean, he was right in the end. Like, you have to have gratitude. I mean, my father absolutely saw this coming. He hated it. He knew it was happening. He started sending Ron Paul $25, a campaign in 1972 when he had 9 kids. But
wow, 9 kids, that's wealth.
Yeah. There you go. But he never, I mean, probably a day did not go by where he did not express gratitude from, this is one thing he used to say, he said, be it ever so humble, and it is humble, there's no place like home. But he would say, this is the greatest country. Like, there are injustices and stuff, but this is the greatest country there ever was. He fought World War II, more or less. Like, he was in the Navy. I don't know if you count that fighting, but there was in torpedoes and stuff. but yeah, like I sometimes feel bad, like he would think I was too negative about this country, but really it's I mean the immorality of it is in our
Yeah, I
name
mean,
is intolerable.
I'm mortified and disgusted, but at the same time, like I said, I realize that if I was in any other society or time period, a time period without toilet paper, like what would that be like, in London in 1870? I mean, toilet paper was patented in like
Go to
1910,
Peru right
you know?
now. Like
Yeah, well, yeah, I've
it's
been to
not
Peru, to Lima.
yeah.
I've seen the Native Americans down there bathing in puddles in the park and stuff
Yeah,
like
no,
that. You
I
see
was
real
on the
poverty.
Amazon with a missionary priest. It was a 5-hour boat ride, and man, it gets you can go back in time.
Yeah, go back and yeah, exactly. And so and when I came back to the States after my trip to Peru, I was very grateful.
Yeah.
I was like, wow, we have, clean stuff. Like
I get to
there
spend 2 hours a
there's
day
soot
on
on every
laundry. Yes.
yeah. Yeah. And so yeah, so just be mindful that we're born into the right time period. We chose to come here. I believe that. And be grateful, love the people that you're around, and do the best that you can for everybody. Like I've got a child, and my child has autism, and I think that you have a special needs
Yes,
child as
my
well.
son has Down syndrome.
And I was told, maybe it's my own sick imagination, or maybe it was a download, as the new age people call it. But I was told, or I had the intuition that that was to teach me pure love. That was to teach me, like, selfless love. And I'm very grateful, for my son to teach me that. I'm very grateful for the lessons that I'm having the opportunity to learn, and I would encourage and enjoin anybody to kind of look at life like that. Like what you would perceive as a challenge is actually a great opportunity. And, we're so lucky to have this time together.
I learned, and I appreciate that. And I knew you were not black pilled and that you live in hope and joy. I can obviously, you've got such a good sense of humor as a sign of joy, in my opinion. But I learned from my son prior to my son's birth. I just kind of thought about the nobility of man, or like the uniqueness of man, whatever. Man is not an animal, on intellect. And here I had a child who had Down syndrome who really couldn't be. He's actually the smartest kid with Down syndrome you'll ever meet, but he's half as smart as like a regular person. And I just had to redefine what it was that made human life sacred, and that he's a human being. It's very clearly a human being, and there's just no two ways about it. There's something about him, and so it does teach you a lot. But it's, again, you would not be happy about it if we didn't live in such a society that was just overflowing with the resources that you need.
Mhm.
So that you can take that extra time. So I'm grateful for that. Yeah, we were born into this time. So we've got, this is who we are. I can't imagine being satisfied and, picking the lice out of my hair. I just don't think I can't imagine going back.
I can't help you with that. You've got a husband to eat your life.
Yeah, but I mean, eating lice out of my kid's hair is just, I don't think it would have been as good at that as podcasting. But yes, so remind people how they can find your stuff. And I also, so should I not ask you to come back? Are you still on sabbatical from?
No, I mean, I'll come back
Podcast.
anytime. But yeah, just go. Anybody who's watching this, please go buy my audiobooks or my physical books.
Yes.
Go to Amazon.com, put Daniel Natal in. You'll find.
I'm going to do that
stuff,
right now. I'm going to support you.
Yeah, and then I'll be able to buy more
'Cause
coffee because it's tied to
I
every
thought
purchase.
I had a problem clicking through too. So what do you want? Which one? So Daniel Natal, Meditations audiobook. Because
Yeah,
I
sure.
clicked through and it was someone else's.
Yeah, go to well,
There it is.
I can give you a link in the description. I mean, if you
Limited
go to-
time deal. $0.
Well,
that's
that's because you sign up for Audible and they'll give it to you for free. But yeah, and also the King James Bible coming out at the end of the month, and look for that.
I might do that. I might listen to the King James under my theory that it's too big a thing to be picky about the details first pass or second pass. I
Yeah,
think.
just read it for the language, the beauty.
Yes. Well,
And,
you're going to read it to me.
yeah. While you're doing the dishes or laundry,
Well,
as you said.
the laundry.
All the
It's a
laundry. you can listen.
never-ending pile of laundry. I do 10 loads of laundry every week. Anyway, but so it's such a joy talking to you. I knew it would be. It's super fun, and we agree on so many things. And what we don't agree on is most enlightening, which I appreciate. So the more we don't agree on stuff, the more I want to talk
Well,
to
that's
you.
because you're a good soul and I'm evil. And I've embraced my wickedness. And,
You're going to lead me to perdition.
you
That
can
would
you
be
can reform me in our next interview.
well, you know what? I do want to talk about. You would have to school me completely, but I do want to talk about the simple things that I like about uh Catholicism. I like the works of mercy, and I like sacraments, and I like just doing stuff, and I don't want to have to worry about understanding the origin of the Trinity, and is Jesus God or the Son of
Yeah, it's
God, and what
not
does that
all
mean?
intellectual. Yeah,
Yeah, I just can't do
exactly.
the intellectual stuff.
Numinal instead of phenomenal. But okay.
Which
Well,
one is that? Okay.
noumena is
I'll go
like
look that up. Yeah, what's
yeah,
noumenal?
the noumena is like this, like the soul of something, the noumena, and phenomena is physicality. This cup is phenomenal, right? It's
And
got
what do I
color and
like?
shape.
I like
Nu-
phenomenal.
no, phenomenal, like yeah, exactly. You prefer the cup of coffee rather than talking about angels on the head of a pin.
Yes, and I
Yeah,
hate the stuff like that
it's an
table's not
abstraction.
really there. Like you just think it's there. Like I don't maybe, but what a waste of time. Don't waste my time with that.
Exactly.
I don't want to
Exactly.
hear about it. So always a pleasure, Daniel. Thank you so much. Please, if we can get a few people to buy his stuff, I totally will buy it myself. I love to support super, super smart people who spend their time contributing in an honest and intellectual way to truth and discourse. Like there's not a lot of you out here.
Oh, thanks,
Not a lot.
Monica. It's not a lot of Monicas either.
Well, and I'm fading, so I I feel like I'm getting disgusted with the whole thing. I can barely read the newspaper anymore. Anyway, all right. Thank you so much, everyone, for coming. And if you'll just hang on, I want to make sure you upload it. Bye, everybody.